far in what could loosely be called your life, you've made a living watching others. Society would call you an informant, a rat, a snitch. I call you unworthy of the body you possess, of the life that you've been given. Now we will see if you are willing to look inward rather than outward, to give up the one thing you rely on in order to go on living. The device around your neck is a death mask. The mask is on a spring timer. If you do not locate the key in time, the mask will close. Think of it like a Venus flytrap. How much blood will you shed to stay alive, Michael? Live or die? Make your choice.
Fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's the Squire here with Royalty Card Gaming. Just got back from Battlehardened Atlanta. Just wanted to record this real quick because I had a blast this weekend playing our boy Riptide here in the current rendition of my Trap House build. Just going to go over this really quickly for those that may not know who or what Riptide is or what champion he is. He's a ranger hero. Whenever you play a card from your hand, you get a free reload in your arsenal from Riptide's ability. Anytime you play from hand, if you have a free arsenal, you can put a card face down in the arsenal. Whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. Traps are DVX, and they have certain triggering conditions that, if met, you can deal damage to the opposing hero. So now that being said, this latest rendition of the Trap House build, it is a mixed bag between Dreadbore and Bard Castaway, thanks to the Azalea Armory deck. Mostly the deck, they're Riptide cards. Like, if you're a Riptide player, you know that Armory deck, like, most of the stuff in there Azalea doesn't even use, unless it specifically says Azalea on it. So in this current rendition, a lot of the times I've been running Dreadbore here. Dreadbore states, once per turn action, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into an empty arsenal zone you control. If you do, it gains +1 until end of turn, go again. And then as a static ability, and this is what was catching a lot of people off this weekend at the Battlehardened, arrows you control have defense reactions, can't be played from hand as chain link. So you don't have to activate this bow to get the static second ability here. This is just any arrow, face down, face up, loaded with a +1. You can't play DVX to it. So it's a really good into this meta because a lot of the even aggro decks have some form of DVX to try and help them maintain tempo, cover up a pesky breakpoint, and we don't want them doing that. So Dreadbore is a great option to a lot of those decks. But in those decks where you aren't necessarily worried about that, we are running the Riptide staple Bard Castaway. This card states, once per turn instant, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up to your arsenal. At instant speed, once per turn instant, you may turn a face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter on it. Really works great with his new specialization, Murky Water, which we will cover later in the deck, and the new Stone Rain card that came in the Azalea Armory deck that will also be covered later. The Quiver were always, at least until the that new spoiler card came out with the Arcane Enchanted Quiver, whatever it is. This one is just basically a remembrance and a quiver. You pay 3, get up to 3 arrows with different names. This is kind of a fatigue deck, so you always want to be running this. For arm pieces, Azalea Armory deck, sharpshooters, aim counter support. I'll leave it there. Battle 1/1. We like covering up breakpoints, and we like the added effect of loading an arrow from into arsenal with an aim counter when we may not have had the resources otherwise to do so. Long draw half glove. This was implemented mainly for Azalea as anti-warmongers. That deck typically hates it, and most aggro Riptides hate it. But in fatiguer decks like this, like if we know we're going to have the time to set up aim counters with Bard Castaway, sharpshooters isn't as needed. And when you draw an all trap hand and you have an arrow that you really want to press your advantage with, that you've set up an arsenal, you can bottom 2 cards from whether your arsenal or your hand, and your next arrow is going to get +4. And it also has Battle 1/1, so you're covering up a pesky breakpoint. Blight Pass, it's more aim counter support. Attack reactions destroy this target area attack with an aim counter gets go again. Battle Worn 1, everything that we want in boots. That being said, with the added setup, when you're running Bard Castaway, you're always going to be on New Horizons. It is not used in the typical way that you would think with Lexi. We aren't going again like super wide in this deck. Most of the time, what you're doing is loading a Murky Water, a Stone Rain, even a Drill Shot with an aim counter, and you're letting it sit there until you can make it impactful with a couple pumps, or the other Spice card that I'm going to get to later in this video. And then in those matchups where you're on Dreadbore and you're not necessarily going to be able to set that arrow in Arsenal and let it sit there, we're running Arcanite Skullcap. It's Battle Worn 1, but when you're less life, it blocks 2 on the first go, and then gets an additional +1 on the second block if you have lower life. Unintended synergy into Wizards. Most of the time it doesn't pay off, but it turns into AB3. And it's the only AB we're running in this other than Trench of the Sunken Treasure, which I'm not going to address. That's a staple Riptide card, and if you don't know what it is, you can go to videos in my earlier channel to hear about it. But the Arcanite Skullcap can give you an option at AB4, and it's something that Wizard really has to play around with like life disparity, things like that, so that way that they're, you know, when they're amping, they don't have to take this into account anymore. Moving on to the Trap Suite. I usually save this for last. It's usually, you know, what everybody's here to hear about. Riptide, he loves his traps. His whole hero ability is supposed to be centered around him. But I've done enough of these at this point, and I've already done an earlier rendition, and the traps are similar enough that I don't need to wait till the end for these, and that's not necessarily the spice of this deck. So obviously with any Riptide deck, you're going to have the 3 legendary traps. They're blue, they have awesome effects, Collapsing, Buzzsaw, and Spike Pit Trap. All have their unique punish factors. Buzzsaw deals with pumps. You dereact this if power is above its base. It's going to cut it back down to the original power and deal them a ping damage. Collapsing traps attack with go again. If you trigger this, they discard their hand and draw that many -1. Spike Pit Trap. If they activated a reaction on the chain link, you play this, deal them a Riptide damage. They mill a card from the top, and every card with that name in their graveyard is going to deal them a damage. So that hits them quickly. We are on 3 Inertia Traps, which power above the base, deal them a damage, give them an Inertia token. Frailty Trap, punishing Go again. You play this on an attack with Go again, deal them a damage, give them a Frailty token. Boulder Trap, power above the base, deal them a Riptide damage again, and then this one's going to put a -1 on a piece of equipment they control. Tar Pit Trap is punishing Go again. You do this on, like, say, a dagger, a sword swing, and like anything, and like the next attack action that they play from hand, the effect does not trigger. It's really good when your opponent does like dagger into CNC, and all of a sudden the CNC is not going to blow up your arsenal. Not that we ever want to take 6, but some cases demand that, so just taking 6 and not having to blow up your arsenal is a great thing. Pitfall Trap is one of the game enders. Basically an Arsenal trap. It can only be played from Arsenal, but when you do, it's going to deal them a Riptide damage because the trigger condition is when this defends. So whenever you play this to an attack, it's going to deal them a damage. Then they have the option to pay 1, or it's going to deal them 2 more damage. So the ceiling is 3 damage on this trap. So once you get them down around the 3 life range, if they aren't respecting it using their resources, you can spike them out of a win with a Pitfall Trap. And then, not really traps, but cover breakpoints with D-Reacts. We have Take Cover, which this is one of my fun cards. A lot of people have moved on from it. But Take Cover is a red that blocks for 4 when you D-React with it, and it has the added benefit of reload. So if, say, your opponent dominates an attack, like an Azalea, you can either play this from hand or Arsenal, and not only are you going to get the first reload off of Riptide, but then you're going to get an additional reload off of Take Cover. So you can play D-Reacts in the instant stage in between when you're reacting. You play Take Cover, and then any one of these traps from hand can be put into your arsenal, played again, and then if you played this from hand, you'll have an additional Riptide trigger to put another trap in hand and put it onto the Chain Link defending from arsenal. So the ceiling here is, you do this with another D-React and another D-React, and it's 4, 7. You're blocking 10 on a dominated attack, which is quite nutty, like if you think about it. So a lot of people moved on from it. I like the trap bounce mechanics that this card presents. And then, like I said early in the video, we are a fatigue deck, so 2 remembrances, standard, gotta have them if we're trying to play the long game against a lot of these decks. So, gotta have it. And so now we're going to move on to a mix of some of the pumps and the arrows, the aim arrows, some of them not. There are 3 arrows that are not included. I'm also hitting non-attack actions in here that we are playing in this deck. So we'll start with the arrows. So from the top left moving down, Murkmire Grapnel is a 0-for-4 arrow that states if it has an aim counter on it, it has +1. And this is pure Enigma tech. So they can have a loaded board, doesn't matter. You load this in with Dreadbore because that's typically what you're playing on that matchup. They have a bunch of D-Reacts that you just don't want them playing. And you want to put a couple pumps on this, typically. Not that there's a lot here that you see, but the deck did win against an Enigma this weekend, so I feel confident in saying that 2 is enough with the pumps presented. And the static effect on this is damage on this can't be prevented, so ward cannot be prevented. It's gonna, if this any single point of damage leaks through with this, it's gonna destroy all their ward, which is amazing for us because it can reset an entire board state. So right now until Enigma LLs, I would argue even still run it with prisms running around that will pop up in more frequency once Enigma is gone. You need 2 of these. Drill Shot, everybody has a fridge nowadays. This works with Barb Castaway or Dreadbore. When this hits your hero, put a -1 counter on a piece of equipment they control. 0-for-4, blocks 3, we love that. And if it has an aim counter, it has piercing 1. So you can use this in a dual build, it's low cost, lots of flexibility with this card. Surprisingly enough, in my testing, this is an earlier version of the deck, you only need 1 copy of Endless Arrow. There are certain banish mechanics for the Chi heroes that can get rid of your Endless Arrow and all of a sudden you don't have an end game. But typically they're dead before that. So we run 1 for the fatigue matchups, and you have 3 remembrances and a quiver and 3 codexes that you're going to be able to recycle this and win just about any end game just by endless arrowing them to deck. This is our primary CYB strat right here, is keeping life parity, burning through their deck while keeping ours at a value game heavily ahead of theirs, and then killing them with an endless arrow to end the game. From the Azalea Armory deck, we have Stone Rain. This is a card that goes great with aim synergies, but I have found that with the new Line It Up card that we're going to cover after we get through the arrows, that you can even run this with Dreadbore. And ideally, you want to pair it on something like a Deadeye, you want to pump this, but all it says is if this has an aim counter, it gets Dominate, and when this hits a hero, they banish a card from their hand face down and they get it back at the end of their next end phase. Like I said, you want this dominated with a Deadeye that is active because of the aim counter, because you're going to get a card out of their hand that you get to look at their hand and pick that card, and then they're going to banish another card from their hand face down, so stripping 2 cards out of their hand, while it's only potentially paying 2, it's a 2 for 10 with a debilitating on hit. We love that. These used to be immobilizing shots, but that card is a 0-for-4, and it was way too easy to cover up for the mini Red in the Ledger type effect it does. So these became Sedation Shot. Sedation Shot 1-for-4. Gets a +1 if it has an aim counter. You can use it in either Dreadbore or Barb Castaway decks, because it's going to get the +1 either way. And this says when this hits a hero, they create an inertia token under the control, keep them off arsenal. And it honestly came up so much this weekend, and people were highly annoyed by these 2 cards alone. Almost argues putting in more copies in the deck, but more testing as new Riptide support comes out will be needed. Remorseless. 3 of. This says if this is put face up into your arsenals, they can't play D-Reacts from arsenal, so we're on massive amounts of D-React hate in this deck. We like this. It's a 1 for 6 if you load it with Dreadbore, 1 for 5 if you don't. And its effect says when this hits hero, for each action card they play, lose a life. So into your go wide decks, this is a great way to be able to keep life parity as, you know, they keep presenting, you know, the 0 for 4s that are going to whittle you down throughout the game. New Riptide card, Murky Water. Works with either, because you're going to get the +1 no matter what bow you play. It's a 2 cost, blocks 3. With this has an aim counter, it gets +1 and Dominate. So if you aim counter this, it's basically a 3 for 7, Dominate. And it says when this hits, banish face down 3 traps from your graveyard. Your opponent does get to know which 3 you picked. Choose 1 at random, so a dice roll, and you get to put it in your arsenal. It's one of the only ways that we can recruit traps right now, and it's also a great end game, big beefy arrow. And it's part of the spice later on that I'm going to get to shortly after we cover the rest of this. Intoxicating Shot. A lot of people hate this card. Like, it's bit me in the ass more times than one. 0 for 4 blue arrow that says when this hits a hero, they create a courage and a quicken token. So basically, you're playing this card for end-game strats where you're trying to hit them with this to force them to trigger your traps to, you know, work out an end-game state in your favor. It blocks 3. I like having, you know, 9 to 10 blues in the aim deck, this version. So all 3 of them get the call up. And then our final 2 arrows, apart from the 3 that I haven't brought up that I'm going to bring up in this next segment, is Sleep Dart. And we need this into heroes that heavily rely on their hero ability. I'm talking your Levias, your KOs, things that are going to leak damage over the top, and you just need an arrow that's going to strip cards out of their hand. And Sleep Dart's just that, because it turns off their hero ability for a turn and can swing the game massively in your favor. So never leave home without 2 copies of it. It's a utility card, so it gets the call at yellow. It's a 1 for 4, 1 for 5 if you Dreadbore it in. Now covering the pumps, no Riptide deck would be complete without 3 Premeditates. I don't care what version of the deck you're on, you're running 3 Premeditates, I can almost guarantee it. The next time an attack action card hits a hero this turn, so even if it's not the one with the pump, you're going to create a Ponder token. Kind of like a mini Plunder Run type effect. Instead of the card draw, you get a Ponder, you get to draw an Arsenal at the end phase. The next attack action card you play from Arsenal this turn gains +3 and has Go Again. So Riptide loves Ponder, we love this pump. If it's not in the deck, you're just wrong. In the aim type of setting, that's you can run any variant. Deadeye. Your next air attack this turn gets +3, costs 1. If it hits an aim, if this has an aim counter, it gains when this hits a hero, they look at their hand and choose a card, they discard it with Go Again. And for a pump, look at this right here, that's a block 3. Like, we don't get many of those on pumps nowadays. We love these, we cherish these, and now that aim counters have gotten way easier than before. No matter what buff you're running, you want Deadeyes in your deck as Riptide. We love information, we love looking at their hand, and we love choosing the card that they discard. And when I said that the aim counters get easier even in Dreadbore, I ran Dreadbore most of the time this weekend, every hero that I faced, and we're going to go through the matchup spread later on. Line It Up came in clutch, dominating Murky Waters, dominating Stone Rains that I later Dead-Eyed in the turn. It's a 1 for 3 pump. You may turn an face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter on it. Go Again, and it blocks 3. Just like I said, we love our block 3 pumps. The synergy with this is you don't have to have an arrow in arsenal with this with Riptide, because you play this, you Riptide, you put that arrow face down, hopefully a Murky Water or Stone Rain, you flip it face up with an aim counter, all for the cost of 1. And all of a sudden, you've got a 0 for 7, it's going to be with this a 3 for 10, that's going to get you the on-hit that you desire. The other 2 non-attacks, Codex of Frailty, no-brainer here. This just give them a Frailty, you create a Ponder, you both recur a card from your graveyard, and you discard a card. Ideally, this is how I do my CNC spam that we're going to cover later on. Plan for the worst, new Riptide card that, like, I played a KO this weekend and it easily won me that game. Look at target hero's hand and arsenal. At the beginning of their next end phase, they discard all cards in their hand and destroy all cards in their arsenal. It's a seek and destroy that you don't have to hit, which is the reason why you don't see seek and destroy here. It's not needed. And honestly, in this type of a deck, the card sucked. And then as an added side bonus, you got all that information. You search your deck for up to 3 traps, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle 2 cards from your hand into your deck. That KO that I was talking about had me on the back foot most of the game until like 2 or 3 turns in a row. I don't remember which. I would play this card. It was the last card in my hand. Go get a trap, arsenal it, and give myself a 5-card hand. And it was keeping him off arsenal. So I was always on 5-card hands, able to block out because it's a trap in my arsenal. And he had to get rid of his entire hand, which most of the time he couldn't because he didn't always have go again. So card's great. Blue, block 3. Some people are on a 2 of. In a fatigue style deck, this is a 3 of. Like, I have no problem against people who are trying to play fatigue with me to recur this and just keep playing it because they're gonna lose cards off this interaction. And now what y'all have been waiting for, the spice. And the spice was literally what I took out for the Seek and Destroys. And literally I started testing this 2 or 3 days out from Battle-Hardened Atlanta because I came up with this crazy idea. You're like, what the hell is that? That's 3 white bordered pummels up there. Like, this is a ranger. What the hell are you doing, man? I get it. This is like, you know, one of the craziest ideas like I probably ever came up with. I never imagined playing, you know, a hero aside from Jarl that was going to run pummel. But if you think about it, we have 3, 6, 9, 12 2 costs that we run in the deck. And most of the time when I've been playing up against Victors and Guardian, they're ideally waiting on a Command and Conquer to pummel this. So my ideology was, it's not going to be applicable in every matchup, and it certainly wasn't. But in the ones that it was, boy golly, did it screw them over royally. If a Guardian can wait around to make a pummel applicable or pitch stack it, why the hell can't Riptide? And it turned out great. Every single one of these cards you see here, I pummeled at least once over the weekend to very satisfying effect. I pummeled a Murky Water, stripped a card out of their hand, and I got 3 traps back on a Dreadbore game. And that ended up being the deciding factor that won me the game. Command and Conquer, enough said. You send a Command and Conquer for 6 and you pummel it, you are so far ahead in value. It's the de facto thing that Guardian does. And in a lot of ways, Riptide does it better. And we're going to get into that more as I show you the matchup spread and what happened. Weakest link, these used to be Barbed Undertows, funny enough. And just as some of my fellow Riptides were saying in the Discord, it just wasn't feeling good enough. But I wanted to target the decks that ran non-blocks in their deck. So I was like, well, if we're gonna try out this crazy pummel tech, we might as well do this and potentially reap the benefits of the card draw for the arsenal that Riptide so loves. And honestly, like, I even completely variance-based crazy, got super lucky. I pummeled a weakest link against a Jarl, and he had a Blizzard in his hand. And we ended up drawing a card, and it screwed him out of an Oakenwold turn. So I've described all of these, except for this one, Battering Bolt, which probably had the most applicability as far as the pummel tech goes. When Battering Bolt hits a hero, they reveal their hand and discard all cards other than action cards. Then they lose 1 for each card discarded this way. There are so many heroes right now that are running D-Reacts, Instants, things that we just don't want to deal with or want them to have to increase their value game. And Battering Bolt on a Dreadbore comes in for 7 and forces them to block awkwardly or give us up equipment in the early game, and it's a great recursion target with Remembrance. I pummeled one of these Battering Bolts over the weekend and stripped all the cards out of a dude's hand. He had 1 action, 3 non-attacks, and they all went to the grave. So that battering bolt turned into endless amounts of value. 11 up front. He lost 3 life off of the 3 cards that he discarded, and they were D-reacts, mind you. If they were instants, I'm assuming he just would have played them. And the last card got discarded off of Pummel. So we got to go into the next turn with a full grip in hand, and they got Jack All. And we converted 11 into 14. So this is the spice. For two to 3 days of testing beforehand, which I'll pop it up on the screen right here. The results at the Battle Hardened, which we ended up going 4-3, but 2 of those games we easily could have won because these 3 Pummels were putting in maximum work and maximum disrespect, which is the reason why we kept him at white border for tilt factor. It worked to great effect. Because once you pummel one thing, they're going to overblock the rest of the game. And that's what you're sitting there saying to yourself right now. I know you're going, hey, Squire, if they know you're running pummel in the deck, they're just going to block it anyways. We have a better endgame than most do, especially with this card in the deck. Okay, cool. They covered it up, to 10, 11, blocking 11. Cool. Arsenal of that thing, and maybe, you get to use it on the next turn if you have a CNC or a weakest link from hand. Or you trench it away and you pitch stack, one of these attacks with it, so your end game has a pummel end game in sight, and we're not just relying on the traps anymore. I can't say enough about this, and plus, the wow factor was definitely amusing. Hearing people go, I have never seen a ranger run pummel in my life, and honestly, try it for yourself. It works out a hell of a lot better than you think. We run so many yellows and 9 blues in this deck that I was ending games and there was no hope for them. Because I was pummeling them down to, below 3 most of the time in a lot of games. And at that point, your traps just do the work. They can't win. And the value that you get off pummel, this is better than Seek and Destroy in a Riptide deck if you're not on aggro arrow spam. This is very much a value, convert big attack or, block with 2 cards, send an arrow. It's very much a value deck, and how I feel like Riptide feels best playing. I've played all the versions of the deck, and so far I can confidently say this felt the damn best. So we're going to get into the matchups now shortly, but I'll include the pummel list and what I changed the pummel list from in the link below. And you should try them both. Honestly, they're both fun, but this was hilarious. And it worked, and even though I never imagined myself saying it, fits perfectly into Riptide's pitch curve. Alright guys, heading into our matchup spread. We started out the day with an Enigma, and that's one of the ones we were hoping to target, and it was a pretty good match. It almost went to time. I ended up winning on the first turn of once time expires. Really nothing notable about this matchup other than we didn't get off of Murkmire and we still won. We saw them play all 3 manifestations of Miragai, and through trap pings and just constant pressure we managed to get there. Notably, the first thing I pummeled in this matchup was, I think it was turn 5. I pummeled a Command and Conquer. Obviously, this guy, he had no idea, and was just going to let his Miragai take the hit on this one. I'm assuming it's because he had mostly D-reacts in his hand. And I ended up pummeling it and destroying his arsenal, ripping a card from hand. So that was the first matchup. Now moving on into round 2, we had a KO, and we started off pretty strong. He started blood rushing about mid-game. like early-ish to mid-game. I'm not going to be able to remember every single stat from this. I remember we pummeled, I believe it was a Command and Conquer. You know, it always catches them off guard. Pretty early on, I want to say about turn 3 that lined up. And then after that, we just kept value gaming with him. And eventually, you know, he's going to see all 3 blood rushes. This game is going to, you know, go down until one of us is out of deck usually. And it usually ends up being them. He saw all 3 blood rushes, and it was only because, like I said before, of plan for the worst that we were able to, 1, keep him off Arsenal, and 2, keep up with the relentless onslaught that blood rush and a KO deck presents. And grabbing traps that are important for those type of blood rush turns really helps you, you know, stave off the onslaught. And then once, you know, he was through most of his go again in the deck, we made sure to basically block 2 cards out of hand and send anywhere from 5 to 10 usually. And then ending the game via pummeling a weakest link that basically got all the cards out of his hand, and then just fatiguing him down to where he only had 1 hand left. We were at 3. I'm pretty sure he had 2 reckless swings. He was trying to get him off, but his arsenal was clogged, and he couldn't DBX from hand because we were running Dreadbore. So just fatigued him out and ended up catching the dub here. And then moving on into the 3rd round, guys, which was Aurora. Probably like the one that was the most eye-opening for Pummel today. It was completely variant space in the way it happened, but turn 0, he went first. He swung 0 before me. I had to take cover. I did the take cover, and I put a battering bolt into Arsenal, and he just made his embodiment. Arsenal passed. Then on my first turn, so I guess turn 1, we drew into a premeditate, and then the resource card to swing the battering bolt, and a pummel. So that was really good. That made that arrow turn into 13. So he had, and we were running Dreadbore, and he had, I believe it was a Sink Below and 2 of the Sigils of Suffering, and then the last card in his hand, and there wasn't anything he could do about it. So he just passed, expected to just have the 1 card left in his hand, and I pummeled it. So that turned it into 13. We converted a Ponder off of that, so not coming off of Arsenal, mind you. And stripped 3 cards. He in total, with the battering bolt damage, that was 13, 14, 15, 16. And I do think he blocked a little bit of armor there. He started out at like 26. And like I said, I'm not remembering what exactly happened. I just remember I was at 38, basically heading into turn 2. And he was at 26, 27. And from there, like, there was no recovering for him. We had all the time in the world to block out, take our time, whittling him down with the traps. And even later on, I think we ended up pummeling another weakest link and stripping even more cards out of his hand. And that was pretty much the game right there. At the end of it, I think it was 27 to nothing. Like, and you know, it was kind of high roll, I'll give you that. But it didn't seem like this couldn't happen all the time. So I was super happy with this matchup, and really excited at this point because, you know, 2-3D testings and you're already 3-0. You know, heading into the 4th round, like, you know, you start seeing the stars. It was a really cool experience with this guy, and you know, so far, you know, everybody just being wowed about the pummel tech and how well it's going is always a good feeling. Round 4, we ended up hitting our first, like, true coin flip of the game, of the day, I would say, in Azalea. We didn't see any of the pertinent traps or able to really get any trap bounce mechanics. We really hit the attack action section of our deck. We didn't see any plan for the worse. And this game was over in like 5 to 6 turns. We were able to keep life parity them for a bit. They weren't like throwing red in the ledger or anything like that early on. Most of the time I was just dominating Stone Rains, trying to strip cards out of their hands, coupled with Dead Eyes. Didn't manage to get a pummel off this game. Azalea doesn't really give you the breathing room for that. And I think we were both around like, somewhere between 20 and 25, similar enough life parity. And then they just really started hitting the nuts, and we still didn't see any traps. So it's really unfortunate, but this was, that's how this goes. Like, either you see it or they see it, and they just ended up seeing it. And we didn't really tech for this matchup. Like, the only real tech in here for that is, like, take cover. And they have plenty of things to, stop that type of shenanigans with, like, Remorseless, same as us. And they made full advantage of that, and we just didn't end up getting there. So, didn't feel bad about this. Heading into round 5, 3-1, still live for the day. The good variance has got to end at some point, and we finally hit one. Round 5 was probably my most favorite matchup of the day. We got paired into a CYB Jarl. It was Ed Knight from the Card Guys testing out his new CYB Jarl tech, and honestly, a lot of Riptides, they don't like going into Guardian. I particularly enjoy the matchup. It's usually pretty back and forth, and which it really was, and it really showcased the strengths of the pummel tech in this deck. Starting off, it was just slow back and forth. He's trying to gain life. I'm just trying to keep up decent enough pressure so that way the CYB life gain doesn't get out of control, and really just trying to fight the number of cards in his deck. And we both fat decked it. I presented 71, he presented 68, 69, somewhere in there. And the only thing I will say was he presented a Titan's Fist, which into Riptide is incorrect. You're supposed to present Sledge in that matchup. And we talked about it after the game. That was the correct decision, and even he thought so, but some of his buddies had convinced him otherwise, and he said he had just wished he had gone with his gut, and he very much should have, because the Titan's Fist, when it is buffed by its own effect, its +1 triggers a lot of the traps. And so early on, the first thing I pummeled in this, and this is like the crazy variance factor, was it was a Weakest Link. And as soon as I presented Weakest Link, it was visible on his face that he had some kind of a non-block in hand. He had audibly said, "You would when there's when there's the one non-block in my deck," which I'm assuming it was a Blizzard. And we ended up. He ended up. I believe he covered it up, but then we pummeled. And when we pummeled, he didn't play it, but he had said afterwards he should have, which he should have, was play the Blizzard out of his hand. But even still, that turn, even if he plays it out of his hand to deny us the card draw, we're still pummeling it, and we're screwing over a Oakenhold turn is what we ended up screwing over. And then from there, it was just back, forth, just whittling each other down until finally we're near the end game, and I have recurred, Command and Conquer's the 2 costs Battering Bolt. Well, I don't think it was Battering Bolt. It was Murky Water in that matchup, because Battering Bolt doesn't really have much applicability into Jarl. He was on some Decompose, so I guess it would have had some applicability, but we were trying to recur Murky Waters, as I remember it, because we were on Dreadbore, and it was really denying his Decompose factor. I think he got off 1 or 2 Decomposes that game. He got off a couple Fellings, nothing that we couldn't handle with the traps, And then we were just usually keeping him off Arsenal, and those Sedation shots really came in clutch there to keep up the pressure, so that way he's blocking to ensure that he's able to keep an Arsenal. And we got near the end, and about the time that he had played, I believe it was So Tomorrow to recur some of his Oakenolds, was when he was down to about, I want to say his like last one or two hands. And about that time, we ran into our pitch stacked Command and Conquer Pummel, which we were at 6, I believe, and he was at 11. And he saw the Command and Conquer. I don't believe he had an arsenal then. He just said no blocks. I pummeled. Brought him down to 1. And then from there, we just simply outvalued and ran him out of cards in deck and ended up killing him with Endless Arrow, I'm pretty sure. But we had the Endless Arrow loop on. We still had Codex of Frailties in the deck. So that's how we ended up winning that. It was my most exciting matchup of the day. And it's always fun beating a Guardian on Riptide. Victor is like the boogeyman in a lot of ways for us, but with all this new support and stuff like that, I feel like that even that matchup's getting easier. And particularly in this deck, like, I'm not scared of CYB shenanigans at all. Like, whether it be in my locals, Talishar, and even now at a higher competitive event, like this deck usually does not lose to CYB. So that's another advertising factor, is if you play this right, this has a better end game than CYB, and it was really enjoyable to play. Round 6 was probably the closest matchup of the day, and it's one that like I've done a lot of thinking about, because really this was the one that if I win, I have the best chance of converting into top 8. And this was Zen against, and the person piloting it was, apologies if I mispronounce this, but Naib Moubassier. Seems like everything I've heard about him, he's a great Zen player. And it was a pretty back and forth game. I think we only landed one pummel that game, and it was on a weakest link. And as it turned out, he didn't have any chi in hand on that hand, or any non-blocks in his hand, which was unfortunate because it seemed like every turn he had a chi, and the one time when we managed to get it off, there's no chi in the hand. We did get a card out of his hand. He was down to a 3-card hand, but usually in this matchup, if they land a monster, their Sacred Art with the Tiger Spam, more than likely they're going to win this game. I can't say that he landed a monster one, but he did get it off, and it netted him a bunch of value. But at the end of the game, we had whittled each other down. I had hit him with a Remorseless, so it did keep the life parity up a little bit, if I remember correctly. Like I said, this has been a couple days now by this point, so I'm not going to remember everything as it happened. But we got down to the end game, and there was a particular hand that I had layered blocks incorrectly, and when I did, I put a trap, particularly a boulder trap, on an attack it wasn't going to trigger, and instead of thinking there's a tiger coming after this with +1, I should put it on that, or it was like a tiger with +2 or 3. It was going to be worth the boulder trap. I put it on the first thing, which wasn't going to trigger it, and then the next thing would have triggered it. And I only say it's pertinent because at the end of the game, he was at 3, I was at 1, and if he had been at 2 instead, the hand that I drew into was 2 Frailty Traps, a Remembrance, which I think that was also a mistake. You should take those out in the Zen matchup, because it's never going to go to fatigue like that usually. Either you're going to kill them or they're going to kill you. So the Remembrance ended up getting me killed, and along with that, it was the mistrap ping that I didn't layer correctly earlier on in the game. Otherwise, he's at 2, he presents a go again attack, and we double Frailty Trap, and we sneak out with a win, and are probably slated for a top 8 run, depending on what round 7 brings. But it was a great learning point, and it's always great getting good experience, good reps into really experienced players. So win or loss, we take it and we move on. And it was a great learning experience. Don't autopilot. Like, figure out whatever strat you have to stop yourself from autopiloting in the later rounds, because your brain will turn to mush, and it definitely did in that moment. And it was only for a singular turn, but as soon as it happened, when I'm in the end game, I immediately knew that this is where I messed up. Like, there was a singular trap ping that would have won me the game, and it didn't, and it didn't pan out, but we learned, and we moved on, and that was pretty much the end of the top 8 round. And the last round was, just a for fun matchup at that point. The final round was against a Kano. I actually had played this guy before at a ProQuest Plus up in Greenville, round 1, when I was on Riptide up there earlier last year, and I was on a feigned death package, and he remembered me, not by name, but we both remembered each other's faces, because he had went for his combo turn and presented 30, and I feigned death his Blazing Aether, preventing 30 damage, and we basically he still ended up winning that matchup, but it was still fun. But anyways, moving into today, he was wondering what kind of tech we're on, and so turn 0, I went first, and I drew into Command & Conquer, Pummel, Murkmire Grapnel, and a Sedation Shot. So we pitched the Sedation Shot, put a Murkmire Grapnel in, fired it off. He blocked 2, KO'd once, didn't send any damage. I Arsenal I believe it was the Command & Conquer. It did that of the Pummel. It doesn't really matter which. Heading into his next turn, I believe he ended up sending 5 or 6 Arcane, which we drew the resources to get the Pummel off without pitching to AB. So we took it, kind of risky, but he set up an Arsenal, and so the next turn we lead off Command & Conquer. He says, after thinking a minute about it, because it must have been, I figured it must have been something pretty important in Arsenal. He says no blocks, we pummel, which blew his mind. He was like, wow, I've never seen this before, just like everybody else's reactions that day. And it took a good minute to decide whether he was going to let the Aether Wildfire in his Arsenal go. We almost got him to pop his Storms, but I think he made the correct decision, did not. Let the Aether Wildfire go, and then proceeded to Kano a couple times. I think pinged us for a little bit, and then I was at 25 at the end of that. He was down to 20. Then from there, really this deck wasn't teched for Kano, but for it not being teched, it went, the best possible way it could, even though we ended up losing. The next 3 turns was Stone Rain or Murky Water. 2 Stone Rains, 1 Murky Water. Dominated for 10 every time. The Stone Rains, one of the Stone Rains had a Deadeye on it, so that was really debilitating. And we ended up bullying him all the way down to 1. Presented a Remorseless for 8, had 1 floating after doing that, and had 3 resources in hand. We were at 9, he was at 1. And, he ended up, dealing 10 exactly. It must have been 11, actually, because we were able to pitch AB2 and he still killed us. We had the blue in our hand, and honestly, if we had blocked 1 ping damage more, we'd probably get the dub right here, if we had blocked an AB earlier in the game. But overall on the day, it was a smashing success in my opinion. We learned a lot, and it was, super close. Like, as you've been listening, like, we were like, a couple trap pings off of a top 8, and that's the way I view that. And for a deck that only, like, at least the Pummel variant, the rest of the deck I know what Riptide does and how to handle the hands. But for the Pummel variant, only being 2 and 3 days in the making, and finishing 27th out of, I'm saying 130, I'm sure it was somewhere up there. 130 players on the day, I'm going to take that. It was something to play around, something to, always keep in mind that Pummel is, it is viable in Riptide. And I'm going to keep testing with it. We still have to, do testing with the new chain reaction card and see if the pummels get cut, because this might be the new way to play Riptide. But I just want to thank you guys for watching. If you made it to this point, tell us what you think in the comments below. If you think it's good, think it's bad, your reasoning behind it. Like and subscribe, man. Hope your New Year's, your 2025 is going well. This is Squire signing off. Thanks.